I never thought I'd live to see the day my family's land was taken right out from under me. My grandfather fought tooth and nail to buy this property back when folks like us weren't even welcome in most neighborhoods. He cleared every acre by hand, planted orchards, and left it as a legacy, our haven. But one morning, I stood at the edge of the property line and stared in disbelief. Bulldozers were tearing into my fields. The HOA had decided my land wasn't being used properly. They wanted it for a new development, 55 shiny homes stacked shoulder to shoulder. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't agreed to sell, and yet they acted like it was theirs. I shouted at the workers, "This is my land. You've got no right." The foreman just shrugged. "Talk to the HOA. We've got permits." Permits. Somehow, they had forged documents and even got the county to look the other way. At first, I tried to fight it the right way. I filed complaints, went to meetings, and brought up property deeds older than the HOA itself. But every time I spoke, they smirked like I was wasting their time. At one meeting, the president leaned across the table and said, "You can't stop progress. The community needs this development more than you need empty fields." Empty fields. Those empty fields fed my family for decades. They held the dam my father and I built, a small one that created a reservoir for irrigation. Without it, the land would have gone dry years ago. The more I fought, the more hostile they became. First came the fines, phony charges for excessive vegetation and unsafe structures. Then came threats. One board member cornered me outside the post office and sneered, "Sell now, or you'll regret it." My neighbors, good people, whispered apologies. They said they couldn't take my side publicly because the HOA controlled everything, the roads, the community center, even access to certain services. It felt like David versus Goliath, but I wasn't about to bow. The day I truly broke was when I came home to see surveyors marking stakes across the fields where my father's orchard once stood. Kids from the neighborhood ran through the half-dug trenches like it was a playground, while their parents smiled approvingly. My land was no longer mine, it was being carved up like meat at a butcher's block. I sat on the porch that night, my hands shaking. All my legal battles, all my shouting, all my meetings, useless. And that's when I remembered the dam. For decades, it quietly stored the runoff from the hills, feeding the orchards and keeping the soil rich. Without it, the land would have been barren. With it, the reservoir held back thousands of gallons of water. I whispered to myself, "They took my land, but they forgot who controls the water." It wasn't just anger that guided me, it was justice. My grandfather used to say, "A man's dignity is worth more than gold." They thought they could steal my inheritance, bury my history under concrete, and silence me with legal tricks. But they hadn't counted on the patience of someone who had lived his whole life working this land. From that night on, I planned. Carefully. Quietly. I started by checking the dam, walking its edges, and making sure everything still held strong. The structure was old, but reliable. The release gates could flood the lower valley if fully opened. And guess where those 55 new homes were being built? Right in the floodplain my grandfather had warned me about. Each time I watched the construction trucks roll in, each time the HOA president smirked at me in passing, I tightened my resolve. They thought they had one. But revenge, sweet, quiet, and inevitable, was coming. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make them remember my family's name for generations. And when the moment came, they would regret ever underestimating me. I didn't rush into it. Revenge that's rushed often backfires. Instead, I spent weeks preparing, keeping my head down while the HOA paraded their victory. The board members strutted around the half-built neighborhood like kings. They even renamed the development, Willow Creek Estates. The irony cut deep. There were no willows, and the creek they bragged about? That was my reservoir. My dam. My father's sweat and blood. One afternoon, I stood at the edge of the site when the HOA president, Mark, spotted me. "You should thank us," he said with a smug grin. "Your land is finally worth something now." I clenched my fists. It was always worth something. You just never understood it. He chuckled like I was a stubborn child. That laugh echoed in my mind for nights. So I kept planning. I mapped out the reservoir's flow, checked the flood channels, and calculated what would happen if I fully opened the gates. It wouldn't destroy lives, but it would drown the construction site, wash away equipment, and make building impossible. More importantly, it would prove that the land they stole was never fit for homes. I waited until the perfect moment. The houses were nearly finished, framings up, plumbing halfway installed, some even had shingles on their roofs. That's when I climbed up to the dam at dawn, the mist curling over the water like a shroud. My hands trembled as I placed them on the release wheel. I whispered to my father's memory, "This is for you. This is for all of us." With a deep breath, I turned the wheel. The groan of metal echoed through the valley. Water rushed forward, at first a trickle, then a roar. Within minutes, a wall of water surged down the slope, cutting through trenches, smashing into half-built homes, and turning freshly paved roads into rivers of mud. From my perch, I saw chaos unfold. Trucks stuck in muck. Workers scrambling. Walls collapsing into soaked foundations. The pride of the HOA, their precious Willow Creek Estates, was swallowed whole by the very land they had mocked. Later that afternoon, I walked down into the valley. The HOA board was there, shouting at contractors, phones glued to their ears, trying desperately to figure out what had gone wrong. Mark saw me and stormed over, his shoes caked in mud. "What the hell did you do?" I kept my voice calm. "Nothing more than reminding you this land doesn't belong to you. Nature doesn't belong to you." He jabbed a finger at me. "You'll pay for this." I smiled faintly. "No. You'll pay. You built on a floodplain. I warned you. My father warned you. Now the whole county knows." And indeed, the county inspectors showed up within days. Pictures of the flooded site made the local paper. Headlines read, "Willow Creek Estates development halted over unsafe conditions." Lawsuits piled up, angry buyers, furious contractors, even insurance companies refusing to cover the losses. The HOA's empire crumbled overnight. They tried blaming me, but my deed, my history, and even old county flood maps proved I had every right to release water from my dam. Legally, they didn't stand a chance. One by one, the board members resigned. Mark tried to save face, but the humiliation was too much. He sold his house and left the community altogether. And me? I stayed. The land was scarred, yes, but it was still mine. When I walked the fields again, I felt my grandfather's presence, as though he was nodding in approval. Neighbors who once kept quiet now came to shake my hand. "You stood up for what was right," one elderly woman said. "We needed someone like you to remind them they're not above the law." I didn't smile much those days, but inside, I felt peace. Justice had been served, not through violence, but through patience, planning, and respect for the land. To this day, the remains of Willow Creek Estates stand as a warning: you cannot steal history. You cannot bulldoze dignity. And you cannot silence a man who knows the worth of his roots. If you've been listening to my story, I'll leave you with this: sometimes justice takes time, but it always finds its way. And if you enjoy stories of standing up against injustice, don't forget to subscribe. I share many tales like mine, where ordinary folks take back their dignity and show that fairness and community still matter. Because in the end, respect always wins.